Nibbling on sponge cake, watching the sun bake, all of those tourists covered in oil. Welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is more Jimmy Buffett in honor of sunny Miami, Florida, and its 20 race car driving tourists. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
You know, Great Man once said that everybody's got a cousin in Miami, but I think that statement may not hold up when you consider the F1 driver's grid. I got the sense that not a single one of those guys had a cousin in Miami or anywhere near it.
Also nowhere near Miami, Danny O'Dwyer, who is on assignment this week. But if you are new to this podcast, there's usually three of us, but in any case, a very warm welcome to you. If you're new to Formula One itself, we've got an episode just for you. Our preseason primer episode assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 216. Also, this show is supported entirely by our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. This month, Rob, we put it to a vote, and our patrons responded with anime. This month, we will be watching Red Line, a 2009 film that, according to Wikipedia, took 7 years to make and features over 100,000 hand-drawn frames. Some people in the Discord were saying that it is absolutely bonkers. I saw one quote from a review saying, or calling it Speed Racer on crack, and I honestly can't imagine what that must look like. So I am very much looking forward to that.
Sold. Absolutely.
Month. Yeah. But that's not why we're here. Not yet, anyway. We're here for the Miami Grand Prix, Rob, the second annual Miami Grand Prix. Kicking things off here with qualifying, which ended in spectacular fashion when Charles Leclerc, on his final run, spun off the track and into a wall, bringing out the red flag with about 90 seconds to go, meaning that there wasn't enough time to restart the session, which also meant anyone who hadn't yet completed their final lap was done.
Well, and this was, so I had thought two people had botched their first runs out in Q3, and I thought Max did the smart thing. Once he knew his lap was scrubbed, he went straight into the pits. He didn't complete the lap to do a cool down. And I figured, well, that's smart because then he can just like go right back out and get that lap done. But he hit the same end of session. He was going for the same end of session window that everyone always goes to with their second run. So like that was the part that kind of confused me, is you hadn't registered a time yet. And so like the timing may not have worked out, where you kind of, maybe there's no point in going out in the middle of a session like that because the times will get faster at the end. But it did kind of strike me that like he was leaving it a little bit late for having not set a time at all. Whereas I want to say, was it Sainz had also sort of screwed up his lap, but it might have actually just been Leclerc. But in either case, they completed the lap, and I think placed seventh. I think that was Leclerc.
That was Leclerc, yeah.
In that case, yeah. So like at least set the time that would sort of hold up. But either way, it was sort of a dream scenario for us because it was one of those like not quite finished fields that we get. Like everyone had not sort of sorted out into where their car's true pace was for the weekend. So Charles giving us a bit of a gift in some ways with that. It did seem, I was struck by on the broadcast how much it feels at least like the worm has turned when it comes to the narrative on Charles Leclerc. That maybe it's mostly Brundle I'm reacting to, but the notion that like he does tend to come up short or make mistakes in what, to borrow a baseball phrase, in these high leverage situations where the driver really needs to be the difference maker. And it does kind of feel like this stuff like does tend to happen around Ferrari and around Leclerc, but I'm also not sure they're a team that, again, has the luxury to not wring every ounce of performance out of the car in these sessions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a salient point because he lost it because he was pushing, and he's pushing because he has to. Also out of starting position, arguably, is Lewis Hamilton, who blamed traffic for his exit in Q2. He will line up in 13th place. But the full grid here, with Max Verstappen being unable to set that lap, he seeded, or I guess, did not contend for pole position, did not come close to taking it from his teammate, Sergio Perez, who lines up in first, next to Fernando Alonso in second, then Carlos Sainz in third, and Kevin Magnussen in fourth. His first time out qualifying his teammate Nico Hülkenberg this year, and doing it with style in one of Haas's home Grand Prix. Pierre Gasly lines up in fifth, another good result in qualifying from him. George Russell in sixth, Charles Leclerc seventh, Esteban Ocon eighth, Max Verstappen ninth, and Valtteri Bottas rounding out the top 10. Behind them, Alex Albon in 11th, Nico Hülkenberg in 12th, Lewis Hamilton in 13th, Zhou Guanyu in 14th, Nick de Vries in 15th. Then we've got Lando Norris, Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll, Oscar Piastri, and hometown boy Logan Sargent.
So one last thought about qualifying, because this just hit me while I was watching it. And remember last week I was talking about, like, there's something about these cars, the tires, there's just something about their handling that doesn't seem fun in a lot of ways. This seems frustrating. And I think it actually hit me watching how everyone was going in Miami, which is that it seems to me like these cars are so stiff that they are just absolute pigs in low-speed corners, that, like, you have to crank them around. They turn like boats. They are not nimble, and they're prone to that, like, devastating understeering. And I think part of that is also because, like, so much of their aero now is like underfloor. Basically, it's underneath the car. You have this weird, to me, like watching the drivers. It's this weird combination of the cars are like more upset by going over the curbs than they were in previous years. Like the jounce over the curbs damages their grip level and, like, really unsettles them in bad ways. But the cars are also so prone to understeering that the drivers have to use more curb than even they were using, I think, in previous years under the previous aero package. And that seemed to be happening with Charles when he lost it, was just like riding what were not particularly steep curbs through that sort of switchback section. But throughout the weekend, I was just noticing the sheer number of drivers who seemed to upset their run by effectively sort of jouncing over the curb. But then you look at how the cars are cornering, and you need to clip the apex that tight because the car can't really make the exit if you don't. And so I like I don't know, people like, I'm curious if other people are saying the same thing, but to me it definitely looks like cars turn bad, so you use more curb through the corner, but then the car also can't handle the disturbance of the gap between the floor and the road that the curb causes.
Yeah, while we're on this subject and Ferrari, they did bring an upgrade package to Miami. Apparently, it's not all of the upgrade package. There's more coming at Imola. Senior performance engineer Jock Clear said after the race, though, that these upgrades did their job. Quote, and this from, I believe this is the Formula One website, yes. They did their job to make the car more benign and predictable in the medium and high-speed corners. This is not the way that Charles Leclerc sees it in this quote from the BBC. Quote, "We are competitive in qualifying, but once we come to race day, we are struggling like crazy. The window of our car is so narrow, and whenever you get a little bit out, it has huge consequences on the balance. It's from one corner to the other, and even in one corner, and sometimes you can have huge understeer, which goes to huge oversteer, and this is not ideal to have confidence in the car." So,
I mean, Mercedes were talking about a similar dynamic, though, even without upgrades, right? Where it was like we were good in practice, and then the car just like went away from them over the course of the weekend. To the point, like it did not sound like the field just caught up to them and they couldn't, like, they sort of hit the limits of what was possible with setup. It sounded from the way the drivers were talking that on Friday, car was good. And then with every successive day, or at least definitely on Saturday, it was just not the same driving characteristics. It seems like a real through line here that these cars are temperamental and not predictably responsive in the way that, like, we know race cars are supposed to be. I guess we might as well touch on this right now because it informs, I think, a lot of the dynamics of this race as well. Before we got to qualifying even, I think some of the drivers were talking about how bad the grip was here, and I think Perez was the one who was sort of most widely quoted saying that in practice, running the entire circuit feels like you're driving out on intermediates in terms of grip levels. And Mario,
you mean like
Zola,
intermediate,
I want to say,
like rain tires?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it just feels like slick conditions out there. I hope he didn't mean it feels like you're running on inters on a dry track, because that sounds undrivable. Although maybe he did, because so Pirelli's head of Open Wheel Motorsport, basically the guy who handles the F1 account effectively, Mario Zola, gave a pretty detailed explanation of what was going on with the Miami track surface, especially because this was an issue at last year's race, and then was obviously a pain point at this one. And so obviously take this with a grain of salt. This will be Pirelli saying this, where it's not the compound, it's the track surface. But he did make the point that this was a track that, like, was effectively, it's like pretty recently, like, resurfaced, like, freshly laid down asphalt, and those track surfaces just keep, like, yielding up oil out in their first years, like, following install. And so the track surface does tend to be, like, slicker than you were expecting, even in dry conditions. But this is where I think Miami gets really devilish. He explained that, like, so the cars will wick away that oil surface as they run, and so you will hear them talking about, like, grip levels are increasing, the cars are going faster. But then, like, you will get more complaints about track surface, because the thing is, where the cars aren't running offline, in addition to the marble buildup, none of that wicking has occurred. So at the start of the weekend, the track surface is kind of uniformly shitty, and the drivers are reacting to that. But then, as they sort of clean up the racing line, it loses that uniformity, but it becomes more treacherous because of how bad the offline conditions are. He says that, grip increased by about 10% over the course of the weekend, which was sort of what their models suggested. But as soon as you were a bit outside the racing line, as well as that, it becomes snappy and difficult to control. It's dusty and the level of drip is not as good. I believe that probably is the reason why we saw some mistakes and we saw some drivers struggling in controlling the car. I believe that interview came shortly after Leclerc ended up in the wall in quali.
Okay, well, we'll see who gets caught out in the race. Let's take it through the start here. Perez has a good start from pole position, leads into the first corner. Magnussen, unfortunately, gets swamped by Gasly on the outside and Russell on the inside, leaving him in sixth ahead of Leclerc. Verstappen, who started on the hard tire as opposed to the rest of the top 10, I believe, in mediums, doesn't immediately take any places, but I think we all know that that's about to change soon. And also shout out to Oscar Piastri, starting 19th, making up 5 places in the opening lap on the soft tire. And it might have been 6 if it wasn't Hamilton sitting in 13th place. The onboard video on F1's YouTube channel captures their fight pretty well.
Wait, is that despite De Vries running off the back of him?
That was Lando.
In turn 1. Oh, that was okay. That's a bad. Yeah, my note. I wasn't sure which McLaren it was. Yeah, because this was the thing that leaked out of me was De Vries having, like, the slow motion, just overshooting the traffic.
Yes, yeah, and Lando actually had a pretty good start too. Unfortunately for him. Piastri, though, had a systems failure around lap 6. He, in the quote that I saw, he wasn't even sure what it was. He's like, I don't know, it's brake by wire or, DRS or something, some electrical thing. He still managed to finish the race, though, as did everyone else. Everyone finished the Miami Grand Prix, which is kind of amazing. But yeah, back to the race. Lap 3, Leclerc starts trying to take that 6th place from Magnussen. And I say starts because this battle pops up many times throughout this race.
Epic battle.
Probably
not what you want to see at Ferrari, but like probably one of the battles of the race, because it felt like nobody had the advantage. It was just kind of like who had their battery charged at a given moment and who was going to sort of fall back and like just tuck in behind waiting for the next DRS. It was a real honest to God duel between those cars. And there was no point where like the Ferrari as sort of the marquee team ever sort of got the bit between the teeth and took off. It felt like they were cursed to keep running afoul of each other throughout a lot of this race.
Yeah, but it starts with a bang. Leclerc passes on the inside after a run down that back straight, which we're going to talk about a lot. But as they come back to the main straight, both Magnussen and Verstappen, who's behind him, open up a can of DRS, and while Magnussen gets by Leclerc, Verstappen gets by both of them, going from 8th to 6th.
That moment where they bracketed him was like just one of my favorite moments of the race. It was terrific stuff. Just the way that all this unfolds for Verstappen and is sort of perfectly, is perfectly teed up for him. But one thing I did note here early in the race too is at the end of that long straight before you come onto the S's leading to the start finish line, man, that Red Bull can take that corner like no other car on the grid can. Max was able to hang that around the inside in a way that I don't think I saw any other car even attempting those sort of like go underneath passes. And Max just like had that utter assurance that the car would like follow his lead through there. And just again, a real demonstration of this car is a different class of car than anything else out there.
Yeah, even going offline, like you said, into the scary stuff. But yeah, Verstappen's just getting started, of course. On lap 8, he dives to the inside of Russell at the end of the back straight to take 5th place. Verstappen then does the same thing on the next lap to take 4th from Pierre Gasly. Shortly thereafter, at the end of the main straight, Russell rides Verstappen's coattails and swoops by Gasly as well into 5th place. So Russell not looking too shabby in this one. Lap 13, another attack. Go ahead.
Well, also just I had a note here that this is where Hamilton starts saying, "I'm not sure we're going to be able to finish this race," which is just a bit of an odd note. Nothing comes of it. He had an okay race, not a great one, but it sort of seemed like he was feeling such a lack of speed that maybe he had fears that his engine was like off and may not be able to complete. But like another one of those races where the Mercedes drivers were not super comfortable for the duration. Yeah.
Another attack on Magnussen happens at lap 13 from Leclerc for 7th place. Leclerc dives to the inside, but gets out of shape on the exit, and then Magnussen passes him back in that quick left-right section. Then the next lap, Verstappen gets signs at the end of the back straight, no problem, and into the podium places. And at this point, Alonso is just ahead and is only 3.5 seconds behind Perez. So the question is, now how is that going to play out once Verstappen inevitably gets past him? And no surprise that happens. He gets by Alonso, Verstappen does, at the same place on the next lap and starts chasing down his teammate. Lap 18, Sainz takes a pit stop and locks up as he enters the pit lane, catching the eyes of the race stewards who hand him a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane.
I think there's a lot of, Ferrari finding ways to screw up is almost mimetic at this point, but I do feel like maybe Charles gets, like, maybe the narrative swings too hard against Charles from time to time, but I do sometimes feel like, what's the way to put it? I kind of don't fully trust either of their drivers. Like, you know what I mean? If I'm Ferrari there and I'm sitting, like, if I'm thinking about when the next contract window comes along, I think they're both very good drivers. But, like, the speeding in the pit lane thing bugged me quite a bit. Because it's like, the FIA doesn't play around with this. This isn't a, like, oh, the marshals may or may not do something about it. It's a pretty black and white rule with pretty black and white consequences. And
it's not a judgment call. It's like there's timing chips involved. There's sensors. It's not.
I didn't see anything in the news stories. Did you see anything like where where he explains, like, what happened? Did something, like, go wrong during his entry?
It looked like he just missed his breaking point.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where I was like, especially on a weekend where, like, your teammate did that in qualifying, where they end up in the wall. Like, you need to not give places away, like this.
Yeah. Lap 21, Perez pits from the lead of the race to get off those medium tires, coming out in fourth behind Ocon, who I also believe has not yet pitted at this point. But that cedes the lead of the race to Verstappen, who also has yet to pit because he started on hard tires. Alonso, who pitted after Sainz, has caught up to Sainz by lap 27, and passes him here for fourth place. The Astons really, I think, deserve a lot of credit for making this season interesting, because it's not the Ferraris and it's not the Mercedes, who also, I should point out, do also have upgrades coming at Imola. Mercedes does.
Well, and I think in addition to the Aston sort of making the races interesting, we have this entire delightful imposter Alonso situation unfolding
yes.
at Aston Martin that has really, like, been a fun bit of seasoning on this whole season, where, like, I don't know when or where it happened, but at some point the real Fernando Alonso was abducted or replaced or killed off, and the entire season is being played by a different driver. It's terrific. The bit where he was where he sort of made a point of calling attention to the fact that he's watching the race on the Jumbotron and had seen Stroll executing an overtake, and was like, "What position was that for?" That was a good move. It is so bizarre. But I will say this, like, I think if you take the thesis that Fernando's always been a deeply political animal and plays the politics of every team, Ferrari's a dog-eat-dog place, especially in the wake of Schumacher. McLaren also just had sort of weird dynamics when he was there both times. And I think it's pretty clear, I think he does genuinely like dealing with this, likes driving this car, but also the billionaire boss owns this team for the sake of his son, who is Alonso's teammate, and it's so laughably naked in terms of, like, I love this boy. I can't wait to see Lance thrive once I retire. He'll be leading Aston Martin for years. What a great kid. It is hysterically funny. I think a lot of this, like, what happened to Fernando's personality is the political incentives changed. Like, here the political incentives are, yes, sir, I do love your son, like a little brother. In fact, maybe I wish he was my son. Don't care. Whatever. I will give him all the tips he needs.
Man. Well, lap 37, we're back to Leclerc on Magnussen once again, this time for 11th place. Leclerc takes the inside once more at the end of the back straight, but guess what? Magnussen stays with him and sweeps past on the main straight to retake the position yet again. And each time this happens, the commentators expect it to be a done deal and are surprised every time. And I guess, frankly, so was I. Mag stan though I am. You just get used to Ferrari being able to keep those places, but you just assume the Ferrari is going to be faster. You assume the Ferrari at some point is just going to be like, okay, now it's time for it to be the faster car, and it just wasn't this weekend. And if that is the case, then you will get, like, honestly, this was the most
like F1 manager ass duel that I'd seen. I fell off that game, right? But one of the things that was a real issue in that was you couldn't really close out overtakes. Like cars did not drive away from the car they had overtaken. The tow was so powerful that like you would just get in this like cycle of charging battery back up and overtaking. That rarely happens in real life, but I feel like it was happening in this race.
The other Ferrari is also not having a great time. Russell getting by Sainz for fourth in that powerful turn 17. But back to the Leclerc-Magnussen fight, which continues on lap 38. Leclerc does the smart thing this time and waits until that second DRS zone, where Magnussen kept getting past him, to make his attack. And this time it works. Leclerc getting by on the main straight into ninth place at turn 1 as Hamilton pits. Hamilton had made it up to seventh place. Comes out in 12th behind his old teammate Valtteri Bottas and has a little scrap with him, eventually getting by with his new medium tires. That was fun for old time's sake.
It was, and I think it was sort of one of the... There was less fun happening as the race wore on, because I think the thing that I was really excited about, I think a lot of us were excited about, was that we would see some sort of Max Sergio duel at the end. Certainly this was something that Horner tipped when they were doing the pit wall interview, saying that their simulation data suggested that the two would be pretty close to one another with 3 laps to go. And it was just after, like, you started to get the sinking feeling in terms of just, will there be a duel? Max's first stint was so good that it sort of seemed like when he went on to the mediums, they wouldn't have to go very long. He wouldn't need miracles out of the mediums because he had an amazing stint on the hards. He was setting, purple times pretty deep into the race on worn hards. And Sergio was contending with mediums that were fading pretty badly for a lot of that. And when his window opened, the performance never came to him on those tires the way it had come to Max. And I think it's hard to say. I think Perez even admitted this. It is hard to say what would have happened if they'd been on identical strategies, for instance. But I do think it was one of those races that really does demonstrate this is why Max is the favorite. This is why he's more likely to win this thing, is because there is sort of an implacability and just a consistency to his ability to manage a race and dictate pace in a way that this was a place where Sergio kind of needed to find something in that vein to pull out. Maybe it wasn't possible on the strategy he was given, I don't know, but either way, by the end it wasn't close. It was done and dusted pretty much by the time the pit cycle was complete.
Yeah, so lap 45 is when Verstappen finally pits, and while he does come out behind Perez is on those old, harder tires, while Verstappen's on new mediums. So it's only a matter of time. 2 laps worth of time, as it turns out, is all it takes, and we get a pretty cool helmet cam shot as they zoom through the Death Star trench run section. Perez defends to the inside at the end of the back straight, forcing Verstappen to try and fail at overtaking around the outside. But as we learned with Leclerc and Magnussen, it is the main straight where there's another opportunity, and sure enough, Verstappen pounces, pulling to the outside on the main straight. Perez does as much as he possibly can to brake late and make it hard for Verstappen, and it is a great move. That was cool. At least we got one kind of interesting action. But Verstappen just has too much grip and hangs on through turn 1 to take the lead with 10 laps to go. Lap 53, Leclerc's hunting Gasly, who has admirably hung tight in 6th place, but unfortunately for him, locks up and allows Leclerc through. That backward momentum continues, and as Hamilton also gets by Gasly on the back straight for 7th on his new medium tires, and that forward momentum continues for Hamilton as he takes 6th from Leclerc at the end of the back straight. So some late game action, but in the end, Verstappen wins from 9th place, beating his teammate by 5.4 seconds. So those are the top 2. Coming home in a lonely 3rd, Fernando Alonso. Yet another podium position for Aston Martin. George Russell in 4th, Carlos Sainz in 5th, Lewis Hamilton making it up to 6th place, Charles Leclerc coming home where he started in 7th place, Pierre Gasly in 8th, Esteban Ocon in 9th, and Kevin Magnussen hanging on to the points-paying positions in 10th. Behind him, Yuki Tsunoda in 11th, Lance Stroll in 12th, Valtteri Bottas in 13th, Alex Albon in 14th, Nico Hulkenberg in 15th, and we've got Zhou Guanyu, Lando Norris, Nick De Vries, Oscar Piastri, and Logan Sargent. Verstappen, fastest lap. Gets that extra point. Meaning that in the driver standings, he is on top with 119 points to his teammates' 105 for Sergio Perez. Fernando Alonso is in 3rd with 75 points. Lewis Hamilton in 4th with 56. Carlos Sainz is in 5th with 44 points. George Russell in 6th with 40. Charles Leclerc in 7th with 34. Lance Stroll in 8th with 27. Lando Norris in 9th with 10 points. And Pierre Gasly is in 10th with 8. Then we've got Hulkenberg and Ocon with 6. Bottas and Piastri with 4. Zhou, Tsunoda, and Magnussen with 2. Alex Albon in 18th with 1. And Logan Sargent and Nick De Vries with 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 224 points to Aston Martin's 102 in 2nd place. Mercedes is in 3rd with 96. Ferrari is in 4th with 78. Then we've got McLaren in 5th with 14, tied with Alpine. Gene Haas and team are in 7th place with 8 points. Alfa Romeo's got 6, Alpha Tauri's got 2, and Williams in 10th with 1 point. And that's your Miami Grand Prix.
What score did you give it, Drew? What score did you give it? I'm curious because, I was struck by how, when I went on, I always watch the races usually on a little bit of a delay, for whenever my day gets around to it, and so when I open Twitter, I sort of see what the reactions were, and I was really struck by how much a lot of people in just F1 media, F1 fandom, seem to really hate this race, joking about it was a complete waste, nothing happened during it, which was kind of weird for me because I didn't come away feeling that way about this. I didn't feel that way as I was watching it. I didn't feel that way coming out of it, and so I definitely had a weird sensation of am I just being way too generous to this race? Did this race suck and I was just kind of oblivious to the sheer absence of stuff happening?
Yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 4, which is usually what I call a strategy race. But it wasn't really a strategy race. I think in the moment, it's funny because when I watched the highlights after the fact, it seemed more interesting than when I watched it live. And I don't really know why that is. I think maybe it gets undercut a little bit by, you see Max Verstappen just charging ahead and you kind of know what's going to happen. There were interesting things, like the Magnussen-Leclerc battle, I think was a really big redeeming quality of it. I think it's just, I think maybe people are just a little resigned to knowing how this race and maybe this season are going to go, or at least we assume that it's going to go that way. And so when they're seeing it kind of fall into their expectations, they just go well, yeah, I guess nothing interesting is going to happen here, which is a shame because you're right. There were some redeeming qualities here.
Yeah, in fairness, once you point that out, when I look at my notes, the stuff, it's a lot of mag and lec in my notes, doing things in my sort of notebook, because they did probably substantially redeem this from being a bit processional, but I don't know. Yeah, there was enough happening here. To me, it felt like a pretty normal F1 race in terms of, it was a fair bit of strategy, a lot of pace management, some good duels, but not near the front. But a lot of it's going to be just determined by relative strength of stints as the race went along. But that's kind of like the F1 I grew up on, so it does feel pretty normal to me. We're just a long way off from 2021. That's not, we probably won't see that again for a little bit. Hopefully we will, but that was a very unusual season in Formula One, as like these changing of the guard seasons tend to be, and now we're in this bit of a phase where there's a dominant team, and unfortunately, like even some of the front runners who are being beaten have also kind of sorted out into pretty static positions, on the grid. But yeah, I don't know. It was I didn't like this. Like this was so much better than Baku for me. I think is the big thing is like another race like Baku, I would have lost my mind. And here I was like, this was fine. Maybe it all just gets sillier because the Miami of it all makes the entire event seem a bit like a damn squib.
Yeah, and I think that is something that everyone can get behind in their dislike of. Is wow, that Miami driver's entrance thing. Did you watch any of that?
I did. So this was unusually, like, I guess because I taped it off ABC, I got the whole pre-race show thing with them doing their whole like, hey guys, what about this? A police escort to the stadium? What? And I was like, are American cops like a novelty to other countries? Everyone's like, wow, American cops are just the coolest shit in the world. And I'm like, this is such a bizarre thing to be like, well, gee, run the siren, Mr. Policeman, as we get the motorcycle trip to the stadium. But then we got the will.i.am Orchestra and LL Cool J like hyping up the walkout. The walkouts for the drivers.
Yep.
So the whole thing, there's an infamous esports video that has been they keep trying to scrub it, and I think they've come closer than they ever have. It's the Heroes of Newerth finals back ages ago, where they. Esports was all about hype. What's a cool, awesome venue to take over for an esports event? And Heroes of Newerth, which, if you don't remember, was a League of Legends style game, a MOBA. But it was the game that League of Legends kind of substantially cribbed from and then, like, demolished in the marketplace. But they did their, like, global finals in this Vegas penthouse, where the deal was it had a full-size basketball court in the penthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be like just the coolest, like the Heroes of Newerth, like championship contending teams walking out. They have the smoke machines, the lights, etc. They didn't have anyone who knew how to light the scene. So when they cut the overhead lights in the basketball court, the scene just became pitch black. and they didn't mic it either appropriately. So you had the one guy on the mic reading names out in exactly that way. And then through a haze of like Twitch compression, you would see like the faint glow of the LED lights for where the walkout like tunnels were. And then like dim figures sort of shuffling out in the middle of this, and the only thing the mic was picking up was the sound of the air canisters firing each time these guys came out. And beyond that, it was just like dead silent. One of the saddest things ever. But this gave off those vibes of like you think like. The whole thing is like clearly this is gonna like pump them up. This is gonna like show this is a special event, and instead you're just kind of left like, what is this? Who is this for?
Yeah, great question. When I was watching it, I felt so conspicuously American and like embarrassed a little bit. Like I promise it's not. We don't do this for everything. George Russell in this Autosport article.
Things.
Right, yeah. He says, I guess it's the American way of doing things in sport. Personally, it's probably not for me. I'm here to race, not here for the show. I'm here to drive, and I'm here to win. It is distracting because we're on the grid for half an hour in all of our overalls. in the sun. I don't think there's any other sports in the world that 30 minutes before you go out to do your business, you're out there in the sun, all the cameras on you, making a bit of a show of it. I can appreciate that in the entertainment world, but as I said, we only want the best for the sport. We're open to changes, but I guess we wouldn't want to see it every weekend. Or would I?
Yeah, I think Lando also had a good comment about just like, they keep asking us to do more on these weekends. In addition to driving the cars, they keep like adding to our obligations that we have to fulfill, and eventually it's just like it's a little too much given how much we are already doing, how many of these race weekends there are. But yeah, I'm with you. It was like there's such a layer of artifice to it because we don't do this at a lot of American sports events. Like, I guess before basketball games, they call out the starting 5, which is a different thing than the starting 20 in F1. Yep. It's a very different thing when they read out the names of 5 players versus 20. And I also feel like that, I guess maybe the other commonality with the esports thing, maybe this is the other part of why I was thinking of it, is that there's also this degree of like, we have to package these drivers as like, the way we package athletes in other sports, almost as if like, hey, these guys are athletes too. Let's pretend for a second these guys are athletes. And it's kind of condescending both to like the fans who are there and the actual like drivers competing. Because it's like, well, however you want to define athlete, they are great elite competitors. And that is, worthy of respect in itself. And you don't need to put them in the trappings of other sports and other sports cultures to give them like credibility. I think everyone this notion of the F1's growing American fan base, they've signed up for F1 as it is. And so you don't need to be doing the whole, Monday Night Raw thing of giving these guys little walkout intros.
You know what it made me, and I just put this together, but what it made me feel like is it reminded me of when they had Grid Girls, where it's like, look, you're dumb. You'll look at this and find it exciting. Yeah. All right, let's move on from that and get to the owner of Alpine saying some stuff.
Yeah. So before the race, Laurent Rossi, the head of Alpine, just lit into Alpine's season so far, saying the team was amateurish, complaining about how bad Bahrain was, just how abysmal they were in Baku, and it's just overall unacceptable. And I think he also went out of his way to say, like, given the resources we are pouring into this team, the results are completely out of line with what we are getting out of this. And it's, sometimes there's tea leaves and sometimes you're basically just hanging a neon sign, over the team that doesn't seem good for Otmar in this scenario. Like, that was, it certainly said to me, like, this either turns around or people are getting fired. So Omar was asked about this during this weekend, and in his very Safnauer-esque way, he said he hadn't read the article or the comments, and he wasn't worried about it. Obviously it has been difficult to start to the season, but as he put it, all we can do when we have issues like Baku is find and understand the root cause of why it happened, make sure we either put the process or the people in place so it doesn't happen again. We had an engine fire on one side, and we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. Then we had some finger trouble on the other. With finger trouble, once you understand how it happens, I don't know. I see you tilting your head. I don't know what finger trouble is. We need to add finger trouble to that. We just put that in the bucket with plenum issues that we sometimes hear about in like IndyCar. Just like weird shit that happens with cars. With finger trouble, once you understand how it happens, there's ways to mitigate that. That's what we'll do. We've done it already. It didn't happen here. So Omar's basically like, we got it. I'm not worrying about it. I'm not going to engage my boss's comments about basically wanting to fire all our assets. He says, I'll talk to, obviously I'll raise it with him over this weekend. Meanwhile, in the background of this, Alpine is also staffing up. They're looking to put their efforts more on a par with the other teams. As Otmar said, that if you compare aerodynamics departments, for instance, Red Bull has about 50 people. And Alpine has about 38, but the thing they're really lacking is sort of the senior aerodynamics folks who have experience as leading teams, and also as the way Safnauer put it, department heads basically get to steal a lot of people's ideas, and that's one of the big advantages of hiring senior staff. Is you don't just hire the one brain, you hire all the stuff that was fed into that brain by their directs. And so that's one reason why these folks are so desirable and poachable. But at the same time, it certainly looks like, if you're joining Alpine right now, you're running into a burning garage. And yeah, these are really harsh, pointed comments from Lauren Rossi. But the thing that is just in the background, all this is Alain Prost having that messy breakup with Alpine, saying that Laurent Rossi was a prima donna who wanted all the credit for the team when things were going well, and basically was just on a massive ego trip. And if we think about it, like we saw in Drive to Survive in this most recent season, when it looks like it's going to be a good year, he's having his meetings with Otmar, and it's like, let's, real hands-on. Like, I'm here running the team with you. Well, there's none of that we shit here, is there? It's all, what are you guys doing with my money? So I don't know. To me, I imagine Alain Prost has obviously a temperamental guy, but also a guy who's been around the sport for ages. I imagine has a reasonably thick skin. This sure tracks with his eval of Rossi, and I find that hard to set aside when I look at this. And I can just imagine how oil and water Rossi's temperament, what he wants to get out of running a team, is with Otmar's, hey, just leave us alone, we know what we're doing style.
Yeah. Well, what are we doing, Rob, with Miami?
Maybe nothing, but apparently some of the organizers are pushing to, what if it were a night race? Some of this, I guess, the thing that's driving it is, I guess, last year's race was too hot and it was kind of miserable to attend. This year was much milder, but there's some concern that when the weather's bad, meaning hot, like it really does make it a less appealing venue and make it a harder place for fans and probably for drivers as well. But it's just a harder event to attend and a harder event to run. So the notion is, what if we turned it into a night race? Imagine a night race also would do a great job of, again, sort of masking the whole parking lot aspect of the entire thing. But as, immediately, the thing that immediately emerges is the time zones don't work out for an East Coast night race at all. You would get some primetime hours for the North America, but you are squarely in the middle of the night if you are talking about Europe, and you're still pretty late at night if you're talking just about the UK. And so the thing that they've done with Vegas is it's happening so late that it becomes like a dawn race in Europe, but Miami, you can't really pull that trick, and so there's it's being discussed as a way to make the fan experience more pleasant. Though ticket sales were apparently great this year. It was a very successful event, but yeah, there's just overall concerns about the viability of this event as it is constructed. But it kind of sounds like, given the time zone issues, a night race in Miami may be a non-starter.
Well, Las Vegas is going to be a night race. Granted, it's on the West Coast, so maybe that has some changes there. But the thing I'm concerned about is, like you said, Miami was too hot. I think Vegas is going to be cold. I am looking at the average temperature here for Las Vegas from Weather Underground. Historic average, 56 degrees for November 18th. That's not Formula One weather.
But it is interesting weather. But no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think I imagine we are in for a lot of complaints about the track surface again, complaints about grip, complaints about the tires. But yeah, I think the Vegas thing is the West Coast doing it on the West Coast means it's 8 hours effectively behind. It's 8 hours behind the UK.
GMT.
Yeah. And so, you run that race at 11 midnight. It's it's an early morning race in the UK, and it's mid-morning for the rest of Europe. None of that holds for Miami. So yeah, I think they're I'm also just not sure. I think Bahrain was so transformed by moving it to being a night race that I think to an extent everyone has it in their heads that this could be a night race. Remember how that one bad race turned into a really good race once we held it at night? And it does. I don't think it works that way. I think Bahrain is fundamentally a very solid track, and is actually kind of the aesthetic of it really does play at night. I'm not sure the whole what if we do it Singapore, where we just cover it in lights and we do that over the Hard Rock Stadium car park. I don't know if that's moving the needle. And I imagine it might even just get weirder for people to attend in Miami, because now you're not even out in the sun. You know what I mean? This isn't beach weather. Now you were just in a parking lot at night. I don't know.
Well, you had mentioned earlier before employee swaps happening, or the gathering of employees. What's going on at Red Bull and Ferrari?
So we've known that Laura Mekis has been tapped to head over to AlphaTauri and will basically be replacing Franz Tost over there. Who, by the way, Franz Tost has said, "I don't hate my engineers anymore. We fired the bad one." Franz Tost just in full don't give a damn mode over at AlphaTauri. But anyway, so Mekis is going to head over there. So why is he still at Ferrari? Why, usually these guys sort of go into what's called gardening leave, where you're just sort of playing out your contract, but you're no longer involved in day-to-day ops. But they're having him play out the thread at Ferrari a bit. And Tost and Horner, I think, both alluded to the fact that some of this has to be negotiated between Mekis and Ferrari, but the other component of this is Ferrari and Red Bull have a number of staff, I guess, on both sides that want to switch teams. And it's being described as a hostage swap. Yeah. Exactly. That Mekis is a major bargaining chip, and the thing that's going to break the logjam is putting down the names that are transferring and figuring out who is willing to let who go early and who is someone they want to keep away from the other team as long as humanly possible.
Well, I'll tell you who it's not, and that is Red Bull chief aerodynamicist Adrian Newey, who just re-signed for the next 1,000 years with Red Bull. So, okay. Well, last bit of news here. It's kind of a fun one. I don't know when this was, maybe a year or two ago, we were shocked to discover that among the racing, brotherhood is there lurks a Habsburg.
And I believe we had the whole Habsburg, and the answer was yes.
Yes, he has a full Habsburg name. Let's see if I can find it here. Yes,
but
Ferdinand,
if the Holy Roman Empire were still a thing, he would be the emperor probably or something.
So yes, Ferdinand Zvonimir Maria Balthus Keith Michael Otto Antal Bonman Leonard von Habsburg Lothringen is the heir to the throne. He is the crown prince of Austria. He's the Archduke of Austria, Royal Prince of Hungary, and would be addressed as Imperial and Royal Highness if only Austrian law didn't make it illegal for him to use those titles in his country. This is an article from the New York Times. They did a profile on Ferdinand Habsburg. I think sort of around the coronation of King Charles, as sort of a look like, well, what happens when you're a royal but there's no royalty in your country? And it turns out you just race cars. There's a really great picture of him just sitting in the Danube River alone with a swan. It's very Daniel Kvyat Instagram vibes. I love it. Honestly, the article is fun, but so you should read it, and I'll link it in the show notes. But there is my favorite, I think, part of it is learning that there are 600 Habsburgs living today, and that they all have a WhatsApp group. He says, I can travel anywhere in the world, and I text the group and say where I'm going and when, and there is a house I can stay at. He added with a laugh, it's like a free Airbnb for us Habsburgs.
There's a little bit of me that's like kind of off with their heads, but also this is so funny. It is just so damn funny that this is sort of what's left of like the premier like royal house of Europe. And honestly, like, you know what? Gotta abolish those monarchies, because then you get, you know, the aristocratic pretensions like don't have an outlet, and they can only go like kind of weird fun places like let's race cars. Like so much, but like this is so much better than taking a huge check from Spotify to go to a podcast with your wife that you haven't figured out. This is the way to be. It's and honestly, that's better than what a lot of the royal family gets up to these days. So yeah, I am pro, you know, move to republics and let the nobility pursue their natural outlets, risking their lives in rich men's sports.
Yeah, I didn't realize in 2021 he won Le Mans. He's in the World Endurance Championship, and he won Le Mans. I don't know in what class he was, but yeah, I think another really interesting part of this article was like, so they asked him like, oh, so are you going to the coronation? He's like, no. See, the Catholic royalty and the non-Catholic they all like hang out with each other, and the two don't mix. So a little like insight into how
that is so funny that even like centuries later, that split still basically holds.
Yeah. Good article.
Fantastic.
I'll link it in the show notes. Speaking of royalty, the top 3 from our F1 Fantasy League, which you can join using the link in the show notes, from Miami are thusly on the podium. It is a 3-way tie between RU Strato. I don't know. Are you? North America, number 1 America, debatable, and Suck, Squeeze, Bang, Blow, which I can only imagine is things that engines do. But overall, all of our all the points from all the races contributing to this top 3 in our fantasy league. In third place, Understeer _ McBride. In number 2, Oberhof Racing. And number 1, Lotus Begin, gentlemen. Very good. If you would like to send us an email, which we read on our pre-race shows, you can do so at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or go to f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials. They are linked in our show notes. That is us around the internet. Now let's take it around the world of racing. The World Rally Championship is in Portugal this weekend for the Vodafone Rally de Portugal. The NASCAR Craftsman trucks are at Darlington in South Carolina for the Buckle Up South Carolina 200.
Please, love God, just buckle your damn seatbelts.
Buckle up, the trucks are coming. Also, at Darlington. We have the NASCAR Xfinity Series racing the Shriners Children's 200. What else? MotoGP is at the Bugatti circuit for the Le Mans Sprint and race. IndyCar is at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Maybe you've heard of it, for the IMS Road Course. This is not the Indy 500. This is the race that goes on the twisty bits in the interior. The IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship is at Laguna Seca for the Motul Course de Monterrey. And we got NASCAR. Guess what? They're also at Darlington for the Goodyear 400. That blimp still going strong. And that is all I've got for this episode. Danny is not here, so he will not be reading from his.
Oh, but I got some. I did. I looked it up.
Did you? Oh,
I looked some stuff up. Yeah,
Rob, that's why you're a professional podcaster.
So there are two notable things that we celebrate. This episode's coming out on the 10th, right?
It is.
All right. It's Elio Castroneves' birthday.
Wow.
1975. One of the all-time IndyCar greats is born in Sao Paulo. So happy birthday to the ageless wonder. I don't think it's his fault that car sucks this year. I think it's the car. I don't think it's because he's an old man. He's still going strong. He's still young.
He won the Indy 500 a couple years ago.
Absolutely. He sure did. And did the Spider-Man thing. But yeah, this year it's not going well over there. And this is also the anniversary of Jochen Rindt 1970 Monaco Grand Prix victory. Of course, his last Monaco Grand Prix victory, because that is his championship winning season, during which he was tragically killed later in the season and became F1's only posthumous champion. But May 10th is when he took the checkered at Monaco.
Wow. All right. Speaking of other names in the racing world, I forgot to mention this from the Ferdinand Habsburg article. He has a sister, Gloria, who's a documentary film producer, and another sister, Eleanor Habsburg D'Ambrosio, who is married to Jerome D'Ambrosio, former Formula E driver. So there's something about racing, man. It's in the blood. It's the chin, and it's racing. Final thoughts.
They don't have cavalry anymore. You know, I think this is really like you can't join the horse guards, and so there is only Gasoline Alley.
Where are the grid Lipin's honors? That's what I want to know.
They did. I swear to God,
what?
I didn't hallucinate this. They did they didn't do grid girls, but they were horses. They never did that, but that would be awesome. Can you imagine just like Fernando Alonso getting just a perfect picture of a horse just letting go right in front of it? No, they didn't do that. But I swear to God, Ferdinand Habsburg did do a promo video. Yes. I'm going to guess for a watch. Maybe for something else, but the watch feels right. But it was like him and like precision riders while he's in a race car.
Yeah, in I think the performance area, like on dirt. Yeah. I think. Okay, I'm gonna have to find that video.
It was more awkward than cool. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yep.
But as well it should have been.
Yeah. You're gonna have to find that Heroes of Newerth video for me. If such a thing exists, I'd love to put that in the show notes. But final thoughts on Miami, Rob?
Better than Baku this year, and so it didn't set a new floor. So I'm happy that we got some good action out of it, and you have to enjoy what you can, and if that is Magnussen and Leclerc locked in a Sisyphean struggle for the duration of an otherwise underwhelming race, then so be it. I'll take it.
Yes, I will too. Well, if you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, including the upcoming Red Line, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.